You know, when you look at a massive, towering concrete dam, there is this underlying assumption of absolute safety. Like the water is on one side and the town is on the other.
Right.
You don't look at a dam and think, well, maybe it should let a little bit of the flood through to relieve the pressure.
No, obviously not, because, I mean, once a dam cracks even a fraction, the structural integrity is entirely compromised.
Exactly.
The line between safety and absolute catastrophe is just erased. It's a completely binary system.
Yeah, but what happens when you step into the world of street-level vigilante justice? Because suddenly that pristine concrete dam is full of hairline fractures.
Yeah, water is leaking everywhere.
Right. And you have to ask yourself if the structure protecting you is actually the thing about to drown you. So in the newly released Daredevil Born Again Season 2, Episode 6, titled Requiem, that dam hasn't just cracked, it has completely burst.
It really has.
And we have an incredibly dense stack of sources to look at today. We are pulling from two massive, thousands of comments, deep Reddit discussion threads from r/Marvel Studios and r/Television, just dissecting this April 2026 release.
And our mission for this deep dive isn't to just recount who punched who.
No, definitely not. We're looking at the foundational cracks in that dam. We're going to unpack the deep moral debates dividing the fan base, the intricate character psychology at play, and, well, the fascinating meta story of a television show desperately trying to win back the trust of its core audience.
Which, is a monumental task. But the data from these forums shows a fan base that is deeply, fiercely engaged with the friction between what this show used to be and what it is trying to become.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to really understand the structural failure of this dam, we have to look at the exact moment the water breaks through.
Absolutely. The tension is just palpable.
And I want you, listening right now, to think about where your own line is when it comes to the morality of the heroes you watch. Because in Requiem, Matt Murdock's moral high ground doesn't just crack. It utterly collapses under the weight of Karen Page's reality check.
Yeah, and if you look at the real-time data of how humans are reacting to the scene, the consensus is just raw shock. Deborah Ann Wool's performance is actively short-circuiting the audience's traditional comic book expectations.
It is phenomenal acting.
It really is. We have this intensely claustrophobic scene where Karen is literally holding a gun, ready to put a bullet squarely in Bullseye's head.
Right, and Matt predictably intervenes.
Exactly. He steps in.
He stops her, leaning on his classic no-kill rule, but Karen just unloads on him. And honestly, the audience consensus is entirely on her side here. She furiously points out that Matt's right way of doing things has completely and objectively failed.
Totally.
She lays out the facts. Like, Matt put Wilson Fisk in prison twice. And what is the result? Fisk is now the mayor of what she rightfully calls a fascist hellhole.
Which is a very heavy phrase.
It is. And before we go further, just to be incredibly clear to you listening, fascist hellhole is the specific phrasing being used in these source threads to describe the fictional politics of the show.
Right. We aren't endorsing that viewpoint or drawing real-world political parallels ourselves.
Exactly. We are simply looking at the data of how this fan base is interpreting the show's power dynamics.
Precisely. And the core of her argument and the argument of the audience siding with her is the absolute kicker here. Matt actually saved Fisk's life in the previous season.
Wow, yeah.
The system Matt relies on is actively being weaponized against them.
So let's look at the mechanics of Matt's refusal to kill. The community data shows a massive split on his psychology. Half the audience is pointing to Matt's deep Catholic conditioning.
And his desperate need to honor the memory of his late best friend, Foggy.
Yes. They are arguing his rule is inherently selfish.
Right. They're saying he is prioritizing his own spiritual comfort, his need to feel like a good person to honor Foggy's memory.
Over the physical safety of the city?
Exactly. It's an externalization of grief masked as piety. He plays catch and release with monsters, and innocents continuously pay the price.
I've always struggled with this dynamic. Let's think about this mechanically. It feels like Matt's no-kill rule is essentially a bucket trying to empty a sinking ship.
That is a great analogy.
You can keep scooping the water out, right?
Yeah.
Arresting villains, throwing them in jail.
Ah.
But eventually...
Eventually, you have to acknowledge that the water is rising faster than the bucket can hold. The systemic corruption is the ocean, and the bucket is just a moral pacifier.
Yeah.
If you don't plug the hole, the bucket is completely irrelevant.
Right. The ship's still going down. So what is the psychological mechanism here? I want to ask you, why do modern audiences suddenly crave lethal justice from their heroes when, like, a decade ago, we used to celebrate their restraint?
It's a huge cultural shift.
It is. Think about the last time you watched a superhero movie where the villain was handed over to the police. Did you actually feel relief, or did you roll your eyes knowing they'd just break out in the sequel?
That exhaustion you feel, that is the key. In older narratives, the justice system was a functional endpoint. The hero caught the bad guy, the system processed them, and balance was restored.
But in a narrative where the villain literally becomes the mayor, the system is the weapon.
Exactly. The audience's craving for lethal justice isn't about bloodlust. It's a reaction to the sheer exhaustion of watching characters try to play by the rules in a rigged game.
So when Karen holds that gun, she represents the audience's exhaustion with a broken loop.
They want a permanent solution to a problem that the proper channels just keep exacerbating.
And because Matt refuses to break that loop, villains like Kingpin remain entirely in play. Which brings us to the visceral consequences of that broken system.
The ripple effect.
Right. This leads us to easily the most shocking moment of the episode.
No.
I want to talk about the hospital scene.
Oh, this sequence is a masterclass in subjective framing. So Wilson Fisk is at the hospital, grieving at his injured wife's side. And in walks this doctor. The doctor approaches Fisk, starts spouting poetry, and literally offers this terrifying, grieving man hugs and kisses.
And Fisk's response to this display of human empathy is to just murder the doctor.
Yeah.
Brutally, right there on the spot.
Just completely snaps.
Yeah, if you look at the reaction threads, the dark humor is wild. You see comments like, note to self, don't provide medical care for the Fisks.
People are definitely using humor to cope with the shock.
But wait, I'm genuinely struggling with this reaction. Are we really saying the audience's moral compass is so fragile that they'll excuse the brutal murder of an innocent doctor just because they felt secondhand social anxiety for a mob boss? Like, are we the baddies here?
Well, it's a fascinating psychological trick the show pulls, because the creators aren't asking you to agree with murder, they are manipulating your sensory input.
Okay, how so?
The show puts us so deeply into Fisk's psychological headspace, like the oppressive weight of his grief, the suffocating, almost alien nature of a stranger's platitudes in a moment of pure agony.
So we experience the doctor not as an empathetic human, but as this unbearable, grating intrusion.
Precisely. The poetry implies order and beauty in a moment where Fisk's reality is just pure, chaotic pain. The audience isn't rooting for murder, they are rooting for the tension to break.
And in Kingpin's world, the only mechanism for breaking tension is extreme violence.
Exactly.
That is a profound point. We crave the silence just as much as he does, which ties perfectly into the most praised creative choice of the episode. Through the entire hour, up until the very end, Wilson Fisk does not speak a single word.
He is entirely mute. He doesn't utter a syllable until Matt arrives.
Yeah, and the community analysis highlights how brilliant this is.
It really is, because when they finally speak to each other, they are completely open. They expect absolutely nothing but their true natures.
Matt is the only person who understands the monster inside Fisk.
Right, making him the only person Fisk can genuinely express his true feelings to after such a profound loss.
But, this craving for lethal tension breaking isn't just isolated to Fisk, though. It's infecting the entire ecosystem of the show. Just look at the visceral reaction to the Powell scene.
Oh, right.
Powell violently blasts that kid's head off.
Oh.
The internet is hilariously dubbing Timu Willman.
Right, the fans had a field day with that nickname.
It was an expected character death, sure, but the execution was shockingly violent.
And yet, the audience response is to praise the actor playing Powell for carrying what they call an incredible asshole gravitas.
Asshole gravitas. I absolutely love that phrasing. But again, it's that same mechanism, right?
Yeah, it is.
The audience is exhausted by the rigged game, so they find a dark catharsis in characters who bypass the rules entirely. Even if those characters are morally repugnant, it commands a twisted sort of respect.
Exactly. It's a localized, brutal efficiency. But the friction in this episode comes from the fact that it doesn't stay localized.
Yes, let's pivot there. Because while we have this deeply intimate, silent, bloody conflict happening in a hospital room, the episode is simultaneously trying to stitch itself into the broader, massive Marvel universe.
And the data from the sources shows This is where the tonal whiplash really starts sparking.
We get the highly anticipated return of Jessica Jones.
Which generated a lot of excitement, although there is significant frustration that her cameo was burned in the promotional trailers.
Oh, I hate when they do that. It certainly robs the episode of a natural reveal.
It really does. But the lore drops here are heavy. We learn Jessica is experiencing power problems, adding a new mechanical limitation to her character.
And we get mentions of Danielle Cage, Jessica, and Luke's kid.
Right.
And then we have the Mr. Charles name drop, collecting superpowered people for Val, with Jessica almost getting caught in that net.
Which is fueling a massive fan theory.
That Bullseye is being set up to join Val's Dark Avengers. Now, when you drop a name like Val, a character whose entire narrative function is to militarize super beings on a global scale.
Right.
Into a hyper-intimate story about a grieving mob boss, you violently stretch the fabric of the show's genre.
You really do. It creates an undeniable tonal whiplash. Because minutes after discussing global government task forces collecting super beings, the show pivots right back to deeply disturbing psychological horror.
Like the scene with Heather and Buck. Buck, using unethical cursed Riz techniques.
That is such a specific internet phrasing.
It is.
Mm.
But what is the actual narrative mechanic working here? Like, why is it unsettling everyone so much?
Well, the community is split between two distinct interpretations of the mechanics at play.
Okay.
One camp sees a grounded psychological explanation. Heather is dealing with severe, complex PTSD from surviving in a city constantly terrorized by supervillains. So trauma is manifesting as dangerous behavior.
And the other camp?
The other camp sees a supernatural mechanic. They think she is slowly being corrupted by the spirit of Muse from beyond the grave, putting her steps away from becoming the new Muse herself.
Wow. So the show is actively using the ambiguity between psychological trauma and supernatural horror to manipulate our sense of reality.
Yeah, they're really playing with the audience.
I actually love that. It feels earned. But then we have the BD storyline. And this is where the illusion of competence completely shatters for the audience.
Yeah.
We have this teen journalist trope.
Yeah, this part was heavily criticized.
BB finds a highly sensitive USB chip, and instead of treating it like the radioactive target it is, she carries it around in her pocket for days.
Just terribly unsafe protocol.
And then she naively asks Daniel who he's protecting her from, when everyone, including you listening at home, knows it's Fisk.
It's a moment where the plot mechanics become incredibly visible to the audience.
Yes.
And they resent it because it breaks the grounded reality the show usually demands from its characters.
Exactly. It's like watching a character in a horror movie who hears a noise in the basement. You know, the trope.
Yeah.
Instead of running out the front door.
They sprint up the stairs and trap themselves in a closet.
Right. You're just screaming at the screen. Like, what are you doing?
But let's push deeper on that analogy. Why do you yell at the screen when they run up the stairs? Because it violates the basic survival instincts the movie has established up to that point.
That makes perfect sense.
So when BB acts naively with a USB drive in Kingpin City, it violates the core survival rules of Daredevil's New York.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. Does shoehorning in these broader universe connections, like the Dark Avengers, magical USB drives, young adult teen tropes, does that fundamentally undercut the gritty, life-or-death realism the Daredevil Kingpin dynamic works so hard to build?
It certainly threatens it. Fans love an interconnected universe, sure, but the unique appeal of this specific corner of the universe is its suffocating, isolated atmosphere.
Right, the stakes are so personal.
Exactly. When you introduce elements that belong to a global Avengers-level scale, the intimate stakes of a blind lawyer bleeding out in an alleyway suddenly feel artificially constrained. The gritty realism suffers because the scale of consequence is suddenly mismatched.
And that clash between gritty realism and comic book tropes perfectly mirrors the show's turbulent, real-world production history. If you've been following these threads, you know the fans are acutely aware of the meta-narrative here.
Oh, it is impossible to ignore.
This is a show trying to rebuild a fractured masterpiece.
The creative overhaul is the specter haunting every frame of this season. The consensus online is that season 1 of Bourne, again, felt Frankenstein together.
Yeah, half shot by one creative team, half by another, resulting in completely competing visions.
But the audience is heavily praising the new team, who previously helmed episodes 1, 8, and 9 of season 1 and have now taken over entirely. They feel the necessary emotional weight is returning.
But let's be real, it's not a total victory lap yet. Even with the new team, you look at the data and see highly upvoted critiques complaining that the new visual style is just too clean.
Right. It lacks the raw, yellow-hued, grainy texture of the original Netflix run.
Which was iconic.
Because that yellow-hued grit wasn't just a filter, it was a visual shorthand for moral ambiguity. It made the city feel diseased.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So when you clean up the image, you subconsciously tell the audience that the morality is cleaner too. And in a show about systemic failure, a clean aesthetic feels emotionally false.
That makes perfect sense. And that friction extends to the dialogue, too. The community completely eviscerated Matt's line, quote, "Imagine if we never met."
Yeah, that got a lot of heat.
They felt it read like it was written by a grade schooler,
Uh,
completely lacking the philosophical weight the character is known for.
It's definitely a sore spot for fans.
But then, right alongside those critiques, you have fans losing their minds over the absolute visual peak of the episode, the silhouette.
It is a breathtaking piece of visual storytelling. The silhouette of Daredevil's horn cowl cast perfectly across Wilson Fisk's face.
Just incredible.
It is pure, comic-accurate imagery translated flawlessly into live action.
And we cannot forget the painting. The symbolic destruction of the iconic rabbit in a snowstorm painting.
That was a huge moment.
It's been a fixture for 5 seasons, and here it gets torn, smeared with a second splatter of blood, Matt's blood. It's gorgeous and tragic. But looking at this push and pull from the fans, I keep thinking about the show's production history like a massive home renovation.
Okay, how so?
Imagine the builders decide to rip the house down to the studs mid-build, while you, the owners, are still sitting at the dining room table trying to eat dinner.
That is a brilliant way to look at it. The dust is everywhere, the wiring is exposed, and you see exactly how the walls are held together. The magic is just gone.
Right. Now, the house looks nice again, the walls are painted. But can a show ever truly win back a fractured fan base once the audience has seen those messy seams of production? Or is every single creative choice now going to be unfairly judged against the ghosts of the Netflix era?
Honestly, it is almost impossible for a fan base to unsee the seams once the curtain is pulled back. The Netflix era is no longer just a television show to these fans, it is an idealized memory.
And you cannot compete with nostalgia.
Exactly. However, what this episode does brilliantly is that it actively weaponizes that meta-narrative.
Wait, really? How does it weaponize it?
Think about the core conflict. Just as the show itself is struggling to reconcile its past identity, that gritty Netflix history, with its current, slightly cleaner Marvel Cinematic Universe reality,
What?
the characters are doing the exact same thing in the narrative. Matt, Karen, and Fisk are all painfully struggling to navigate a world that has fundamentally outgrown their old rules of engagement.
Oh, that is so true.
Yeah.
Karen is realizing the old rules don't work.
Uh.
Fisk is realizing his old methods of control are shifting.
The show's real-world identity crisis is the actual text of the episode. The characters are as lost in the transition as the audience is.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? When you sit down to watch these stories, it's worth thinking about how your own media consumption shapes your real-world expectations. It's a fascinating mirror to hold up.
It really is.
When exactly do we, as an audience, stop cheering for the hero's restraint? At what point do we decide the system is so profoundly broken that we start cheering for the anti-hero's brutality instead?
We do at the exact moment we lose faith in the structure holding everything together. The dam breaks.
Which brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with. Something that goes a bit deeper than the mechanics discussed in the forums. Think about that rabbit in a snowstorm painting that was ruined in this episode.
Right.
For years, that painting represented Wilson Fisk's deep desire to feel alone, to find something pure and blank in a chaotic, dirty world. Now it's torn. It has a second brutal blood splatter on it.
It is a really powerful image.
If art truly reflects the soul of the city, does the violent destruction of this painting symbolize that the pure version of New York is just gone forever?
The illusion of purity has definitely been permanently shattered.
And if the city is permanently corrupted, if the dam holding back the dark water has finally totally burst, what does that mean for the millions of ordinary citizens on the ground? The people who can't just put on a devil mask to fight back, or hide behind a bulletproof mayoral desk to survive the flood. Keep an eye on the water level out there. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Take care.